A billionaire Hungarian-American who positions himself as a political activist has today targeted India and its Prime Minister. He's brought up the Hindenburg hit on Adani and hopes that it will weaken Prime Minister Modi. This unsolicited call for a practical regime change of a democratically elected government from a non-state actor, people say, betrays a larger conspiracy. Now, Editor-in-Chief of Times Now, Rahul Shivshankar, spoke to author Rajiv Malhotra about the vested interests allegedly defaming India.
Viewers, as I've told you, and as we have all been speaking about this, as you know, this element of outside interference, it's almost becoming dogmatic. And there are certain individuals associated with wanting to impose a particular point of view, let's say on India and on people here in India. Now, BJP says the latest person to attempt this is George Soros. He's part of a Break India plot. But to many around the world, he is a do-gooding billionaire, crusader for democracy. Now, we are speaking to an authority on the subject of how there is a deep-seated conspiracy to stunt India's growth and its emergence as one of the greatest powers on earth. And one of those individuals, who's also an author, is Mr. Rajiv Malhotra, who has written a series of books on this particular subject, the latest, of course, being a second iteration of his Break India. I want to bring you in on this. Is there truth to the BJP's claim, to the sort of right of center claim that people like George Soros or others are actually militating against India's rise on the global stage?
Well, thank you for having me, Rahul, on this very important event. You see, yesterday, Bloomberg News put out a 2-minute video in which George Soros is directly saying this. George Soros on camera, looking at the camera, reading out something from somebody had briefed him or whatever, says that this Adani controversy, bringing down Adani is equivalent to bringing down Modi. And this is going to put pressure on Modi, who is not really a true democracy, but more of a fake democracy. And then he goes on to say that he's hopeful that things will become more democratic in India as a result of that. This is as clear as it gets from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And this is recently I was on the plane. I just arrived yesterday from the United States, and I think I was somewhere on the plane when this happened. So I would say in the last day or two, this came out straight from Soros, and it's on Bloomberg. So that statement which the BJP is complaining about is absolutely true.
The motive? What about the motive?
So, Soros has been one of those guys claiming to be like God, So I'm rich enough, so now I'll decide what kind of a world we need in the future. And Soros is not the only one. He's the best known among these kind of people. Soros is not the only one, but he's the best known among these kind of people. So there are many other Soros type people, but he's very extreme left and very emphatic about what he's doing. And he has a large entourage of Indians who are supporting him. A lot of Indians some Indians have worked in his organization. He's some very rich people also. But then he's supporting a whole lot of NGOs around the world. A large part of the money he gives, multiple billions of dollars, comes to India. And the thing that makes it worse for India is that he's connected with the World Economic Forum, with people at places like Harvard, people in the Democratic Party. People who are on the extreme left, they see him as a major source of funding because he spends so much money on all kind of things. And in my book, some of the culprits I pointed out, I named, actually get their funding from him. So Soros is sort of the icon, but he's in his 80s. And you must remember that once in a while he'll show up and make this statement because it has a huge effect. But there are many younger Soroses that are following in his footsteps. Some of them we've named, like Omi Diyar, for example, who's very young, half his age, and extremely active in India as an investor in technology. So this business of people who make a lot of money suddenly get in their head that they will design the world because they know better.
So let
and
me
they have
quote
this arrogance of power.
Mr. Malhotra, this is what you've written about George Soros in your own book. George Soros is a Hungarian-American committed to fighting nationalists and conservative governments which he deems to be authoritarian. His organizations in India under his flagship Open Society Foundations started out by offering scholarships and fellowships for pursuing studies and research, but rapidly built a vast network of journalists and media outlets across India that are fiercely anti-India. Now, what he says is that, look, I believe in the power of democracy, and I don't like anyone chipping away at the edifice of democracy, and therefore I am funding these various independent media organizations, think tanks, call them what you want, who strive to strengthen democracy. At least that's what they claim to be doing. So why are you crucifying me? Why do you think my philanthropy is so suspect? Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so you see, the thing is, democracy is not without what works in the United States, and his recipes and his diagnosis of the United States does not apply to India. India's democracy requires the very institutions that he's trying to break down. So if he breaks down a sense of national narrative, which every country has, that's not anti-democratic. I mean, the United States has American exceptionalism and all these, France does, Britain does, everybody has a grand narrative of their country. But somehow the Vedic or Indian or Hindu kind of a narrative bothers these people a lot. And they think that that is stifling democracy because it's hurting Muslims or Christians or minorities of some kind or other. So this is an issue that Indians need to be able to debate very directly with these guys, because they have somehow considered the rise of Indian nationalism and Indian patriotism to be inherently undemocratic, which means if you try to please them on democracy, you'll have to become a weak country. And if you're a weak country, you don't have a strong assertiveness, a strong sense of identity for yourself, then of course you're going to be vulnerable. So I don't think that becoming weak makes you more democratic. It actually makes you vulnerable to recolonization and invasion. So in this world where especially India is surrounded by very nasty kind of a neighborhood, we have to have a strong leadership. So I don't think that there is anything incompatible between that and democracy.
You're right. Another person roped in by Soros' Open Society Foundation is Amardeep Singh, co-founder of the US-based NGO Sikh Coalition. He was appointed by President Obama to his Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Since 2014, he has been working with Open Society Foundation as its senior program officer. The Sikh Coalition website supported the rioters, stating the crackdown, including tear gas, water cannons, baiting charges, internet and resource shutdowns, censorship of journalists, the arrest and detention of activists, and concerted efforts from government leaders and state-aligned media to portray the protesters as terrorists. You also then talk about Soros and the Council of American Islamic Relations. You say that among the farmer activists and citizens listed as supporters was the Council of American Islamic Relations that has been backing Kashmir separatism. You then also refer to Harsh Mandar. You say that comes with the backing of Breaking India heavyweights like George Soros, who has nominated him for the Nobel Prize of 2022. The Soros-funded Peace Research Institute Oslo that nominates for prize made the following announcement. And you go on to say, under Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist administration, the situation of Muslims in India has become increasingly difficult. Of course, Harsh Mandar is associated with Karwa-e-Mohabbat, which he launched. So you've sort of put under the Soros rubric several individuals who are the critics of the Modi government. Now, some people will say that, look, being critics of Modi, etc., that should not single you out for suspicion. You're doing your job. If you are a, watchdog, or you self-proclaim sort of human rights watchdog, then if you think that there are things going wrong, what's wrong about speaking up for them?
Yeah, I mean, I support that people should criticize the government. I'm critical. I have many things to say about government doing good job and government not doing good job, and it's my right. But at the same time, I know some limits. There are some boundaries. There is some maryada. And, the people who are kind of encouraging violence, encouraging riots, encouraging mob mentality, I think they're crossing the line. So it's a question of Indian laws. It's not somebody like a Soros who has to adjudicate I think that somebody sitting overseas adjudicating a conflict in India or a controversy in India is not the way to go. This is something Indians made a mistake during the British Raj, going to the British to get them to involve to adjudicate the internal disputes among Rajas and different factions, and the British ended up creating this divide and rule and running the whole country. So I think the lesson we learned is don't go to some foreign agency to sort out internal differences. We got to learn how to sort it out. We have a court system, we have elections, and nobody. The interesting thing is nobody who lost these elections is claiming that the elections were rigged. I mean, I don't think that is the claim. So democracy as such, in terms of electing people, is working. Now, if the electorate are voting for people legitimately in a democracy, then these people are anti-America or anti-Soros or anti some policy coming from overseas. That doesn't mean that it's anti-democracy. It means